Ms. Humbert here. Today we're going to be doing the Unit 4 Quiz 3 review. So we're preparing you for that next quiz. So the first thing you want to do when you look at any of these problems is make sure that there isn't a greatest common factor you can take out. Well, between 1, 5, and 6, there isn't. So I can immediately go into setting up my x. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to be multiplying to 6 and adding to 5. So what multiplies to 6 and adds to 5? Well, that's going to be 2 and 3. So remember that that's what I'm going to use to split up my 5x. So instead of writing 5x, I'm going to write 2x plus 3x plus 6. And now I'm going to factor by grouping. So I'm going to make two groups. Between x squared and 2x, I can divide out an x. So I'm going to take out that x. When I do x squared divided by x, I get x, and 2x divided by x is just 2. Between 3 and 6, we can take out a 3. So we're dividing each of these terms by 3. So 3x divided by 3 is just going to be x, and 6 divided by 3 is going to be 2. So I notice that I have x plus 2 as a leftover. So I'm going to write that out first. And then in the next parenthesis, I'm going to write x plus 3. So this right here is your final answer for number 1. Now let's take a look at number 2. Since there is no middle term, I'm going to be multiplying to negative 100, but there's no x term. And since there's no x term, that means I'm going to be adding to 0. So what multiplies to negative 100 and adds to 0? Well, in order to add to 0, we have to have a positive and a negative of the same number. So that's going to end up being 10 and negative 10. So I'm going to use that and write it as if my b term was there. So I'm going to put 10x minus 10x as if my b was there. And now I'm going to do factoring by grouping. So between x squared and 10x, I can divide out an x. So I'm going to divide each of those terms by x. X squared divided by x is x. 10x divided by x is just 10. Now I notice that my middle term is negative, so I know I need to take out a negative greatest common factor. So what divides negative 10x and 100? Well, that's going to be negative 10. So I'm dividing each of these by a negative 10, and then I end up getting x plus 10. So I'm going to go ahead and take out what was left over, which is x plus 10. So once I factor that out, I'm going to write what's left after that, which is x minus 10. So this right here is my final answer for number 2. Let's take a look at number 3. So for number 3, we need to set up our x. So 4 times negative 1 is negative 4, and then we're adding to 3. So I'm going to use 4 and negative 1 in order to multiply to a negative 4 and add to 3. So I'm going to take that out of and use that to split up my middle term. So instead of having a positive 3x, I'm going to have 4x minus 1x and then minus 1. So I'm going to go ahead and factor by grouping. Between 4x squared and 4x, I can take out a 4x. So when I divide each of those terms by 4x, I end up getting x plus 1. Then between negative 1x and negative 1, all I can do is take out a 1, and I'm going to take out a negative 1 because that sign right there is negative. And then I get x plus 1. So then these leftovers are matching, so I'm going to go ahead and write those out. And then I'm going to write what's left after that, which is 4x minus 1. So this right here is your final answer for number 3. Taking a look at number 4, there is no greatest common factor we can take out of x squared, 8, and 1. So I'm multiplying to 16 and adding to a negative 8. Here I have a positive product and a negative sum. So in order to add to a negative 8, I'm going to have to use negative 4 and negative 4. Both my products need to be negative to add to a negative sum. So then I get x squared minus 4x plus 16. Again, splitting up that negative 8. So I'm going to go ahead and make two groups. So I have x squared minus 4x. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide each side by x, and then I get that x minus 4. Now between negative 4 and 16, I can take out a 4. Again, that middle term is negative, so I'm going to take out a negative 4, and then I end up getting x minus 4. So here I have x minus 4 and x minus 4 as my leftovers, so I'm going to factor that out. And then on the outside, I also have x minus 4. Since I have the same two factors, I'm going to write that as x minus 4 quantity squared. So that's your final answer for number 4. Now, let's take a look at number 5. Now remember, in order for me to get my top, I need to take 3 and multiply it times 2. Don't forget the multiplication step. So I'm going to get that I'm multiplying to 6 and adding to 7. Well, to do that, I'm going to use 6 and 1. So I'm going to use that to split up the 7x. So I get 3x squared plus 6x plus 1x plus 2. Okay, so now I need to factor by grouping. Between 3 and 6, I can take out a 3 and an x. So then I'm dividing each of those terms by 3x. So then I get x plus 2. Out of the second group, I can take out a 1, and then I get x plus 2. So I'm going to take out the x plus 2 because those are my leftovers that are matching. And then I'm going to write what's left in the second parenthesis. So that's your final answer for number 5. Now when I look at number 6, I notice that 2x squared, 2x, and negative 40 are all divisible by 2. So I'm actually going to take out a greatest common factor of 2. So I'm dividing all of those by 2. So 2x squared divided by 2 is just going to be x squared. 2x divided by 2 is just 1x. And negative 40 divided by 2 is negative 20. So now when I go to factor, I'm going to take my little sister and I'm going to ignore her. Okay, I'm going to ignore her until I leave the mall and get to the very end of my problem. I need to make sure I have my little sister with me. So I'm just going to focus on this. So for my top, I'm going to multiply to negative 20. 1 times negative 20 is negative 20, and then I'm going to add to 1. So I'm going to get 5 and negative 4 in order to add to 1. So now I'm just going to factor by grouping the part that's on the inside of the parenthesis. And now I'm ready to factor by grouping. So I'm going to make my two groups. What divides x squared and 5x? Well, that's just going to be x. You divide each of those by x, and you get x plus 5. Then we have negative 4 and negative 20, so I'm going to factor out a negative 4 because that sign in the middle is negative, and then I get x plus 5. So then I take out the x plus 5s, factor that out, and then after that I'm going to write what's left over. Now I'm at the end of my problem, so I cannot forget my little sister. So on the outside of those two factors, I need to make sure I write my little sister, which is that 2. All right? So let's take a look at these last couple of problems here. So remember, when you're solving systems using graphing, you're going to graph the two lines and see where they connect. So y is equal to x plus 3. So you're crossing the y-axis at 3. And then your slope for the x is 1, which is the same as 1 over 1. So here I'm going up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, and graphing that line. So I'm going to graph that line to the best of my abilities on here. I'm really bad at drawing straight lines on my iPad. All right, so then we're going to take a look at this one. So that means we're crossing the y-axis at a negative 1. Remember, that constant that's added on at the end is always where you're crossing the y-axis. And then my slope is 2, which is the same as 2 over 1. So I'm going up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1. So then I'm going to go ahead and draw this line. And it looks like it's connecting right at this point right here. Remember, graphing isn't accurate, so you might be a little bit off, and that's okay. So on mine, it looks like I'm going over 1, 2, 3. So my x-coordinate is 3, and then I'm going up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So my estimated point then is 3, 6. Okay. Next, let's go ahead and let's take a look at this one. Well, we can go ahead and graph that first equation, the y is equal to negative x plus 1. So I'm crossing the y-axis at 1. And then my slope is going to be a negative 1, which is really down 1, right 1. Down 1, right 1. So I'm going to go ahead and plot that point to start off with. So there's that one. Then in order for us to graph this equation, we have to solve it for y. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract 2x from both sides, and y is equal to a negative 2x minus 3. So when we have a minus 3, that means we're crossing the y-axis at a negative 3, and then I'm going down to right 1. You could also go up to left 1. That works as well. So I'm going to go ahead and draw that line. So it looks like they're crossing at about this point right here. So I'm going over 1, 2, 3 to the left, which means it's negative, and I'm going up 1, 2, 3, 4. So then that's going to be a positive 4. So that concludes your review video. You can go ahead and take the quiz once you are ready. Thanks for listening.